Obama administration officials, including General Stanley McChrystal and Ambassador Carl Eikenberry, are on Capitol Hill testifying, trying to convince lawmakers to accept and support Barack Obama's Afghanistan strategy. But Congressman Ron Paul warns that these plans could result in a foreign policy disaster. He joins me today to discuss. Dr. Paul, thank you so much for being here. So first of all, I want to get your take on the decision. Do you agree with Barack Obama sending 30,000 more troops over there?
No, I radically oppose that idea. It's foolish. It's totally wasteful. He can't win. He doesn't even know what the goals are. We shouldn't even make this attempt to occupy and nation build in Afghanistan. So I think it's a serious mistake. 8 years is long enough to figure out you've made a mistake. So I say we ought to get out of there and come home before we spend a lot more and more people die.
But here's the thing. There are about close to 70,000 troops on the ground. They're the troops that are asking for more boots on the ground. Barack Obama is the commander-in-chief. So what is he supposed to do then? Is he supposed to just ignore his troops? I mean, he's in a really tight space here.
Yeah, but I think his solution is impossible, too, because if he could describe victory as total control of the country and total victory, he might need 300,000. But nobody's going to give him 300,000. So, yeah, you're radical if you want $300,000 to do what some military people think you should do, or if you want to leave like I do. Those positions aren't acceptable. They call those extreme viewpoints, but one is right and one is wrong. So what do? They do something in the middle. They just perpetuate the fraud, pretend they're doing something holy, not accomplishing anything, and just spending more lives and more money. So I see no chance whatsoever for this policy to be successful.
Well, it's interesting because administration officials also mentioned, shifting responsibility to the Afghans, trying to grow the Afghan army. How can they do this, given the fact that, there's ethnic conflict within this institution? You have the turnover rate. It took them 8 years to try to do it. How are they going to do it in 18 months? Is this realistic?
No, it's not realistic, and they don't understand the history. They don't even understand the geography or the factions, the Pashtuns and Tajiks, and that whole issue there. I mean, there's civil strife.
Some officials have said that there may be a civil war brewing within the Afghan army itself.
I would say that is already going on, and we're just picking sides and helping one side versus the other, which guarantees the civil war. But I think the overriding issue is what motivates hatred toward us is the presence, our occupation. And it continues to spread, first Iraq and then Afghanistan, and very much so in Pakistan. Of course, our government just said, we're not going to send troops into Pakistan. And probably under their breath, they'll say, unless it's necessary. But our bombs are dropped in Pakistan and people are dying.
A country that's considered an ally that the United States has not declared a war against, right?
Yeah, that's what they say, but, even if we try to pretend that we'll get along with the government and send them money and they're supposed to help us find all the bad guys, I mean, the people themselves don't like us being there. Probably 90% of the people in Pakistan aren't in favor of us doing anything that we're doing over there, and they're sympathetic with the Taliban.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned Pakistan because we do have to consider the other players, right? When it comes to Afghanistan, we have to think about Iran, Saudi Arabia, India. Is the Obama administration considering what other interests there may be as far as other nations, other factions? Did he leave this out of the strategy or just perhaps out of his speech?
No, I think his goal is the same as the goal of the previous administration, and that's total control of the region. For various reasons. There's more than one reason. It could be oil, and it could be, promoting our goodness and these various excuses they have. But no, the foreign policy of the Republican Party and the Democratic Party is essentially the same, and they're just pursuing it. And I think it's regional. It's just not one country. It wasn't limited to getting Saddam Hussein because he was a bad guy. We get rid of him, and everything's going to be okay. One leads to the next, and they are going to now put stronger sanctions on Iran next week, and that's just going to further make the problems worse for us over there.
Here's something else that was glossed over a little bit, a very important issue. How are they going to pay for this? Because the numbers here are staggering. It's something like $1 million per each soldier per year over there in Afghanistan. Barack Obama did make that link between national security and the economy. You seem to make a different link, one that kind of contradicts a little bit, especially.
Yeah, I mean, you commit that kind of money, it just further weakens our own economy.
Where is the money, though? Where are they getting it?
Out of thin air. It is thin air money. And as long as people trust the dollar, you can create money like that. And the world still thinks the dollar's okay. People are still taking dollars and we're still using them. But economic law says there's always a limit. And we may be reaching that limit. And whether that limit is met in a month or two or a year or two, we will eventually meet it unless we change our policies. You just can't do this. Otherwise, why would Americans have to work? We could just, run the printing presses and pass out money and pay our soldiers and buy off our enemies and do all these things. But it doesn't work that way. The laws of economics finally rule.
Well, speaking of money, you've been fighting your own battle here on the Hill for over 2 decades. I'm speaking, of course, about the Audit the Fed bill. Where are we now with that? Because as I understand it, progress has been made as far as that bill goes.
Yeah, the bill was put in the form of an amendment and presented on the bank regulation bill and passed pretty easily. And it's on a bill that is not a very good bill that I can't support overall. But the amendment got put on there, and it will be brought to the House floor this week and voted on, and it still would have to be passed in the Senate for it to become law.
What do you think a potential audit of the Fed would expose? Would people be shocked what goes on in this institution behind closed doors?
Well, the way the Federal Reserve is fighting to keep us from finding out what they're doing, it sounds like we will be shocked. Otherwise, if they were doing nothing special and it was pretty benign, they would say, come look at these books, there's nothing here.
Well, they're saying this is going to ruin our independence.
Oh, yeah, it's just a bunch of talk. They want secrecy because they have so much power. I think you'd find out that we make deals with other governments and other banks. Just like the money that we need to fight a war, we create out of thin air. He creates out of thin air and makes a deal, extends a loan to a bank or a central bank or a government and asks them to maybe buy our debt. Who knows what kind of deals they make? But that's one thing they really don't want us to know is what kind of influence the Federal Reserve, who controls our money, make with other countries. Well,
speaking of influence, you've called for actually the end of the Fed. Do you think that'll ever happen in your lifetime, in my lifetime?
Probably not. It would end essentially, though, if you have a runaway inflation and the dollar's destroyed. People will say, how can we entrust the Federal Reserve? They're supposed to protect our dollar. And they claim that they do a pretty good job on maintaining employment and price stability. Well, they've lost 95% of the value of the dollar, and unemployment rate's 20%. So if you have runaway inflation and destroy the dollar, I think all credibility of the Fed will be gone. But in the meantime, what I plan to do, matter of fact, I have already today introduced a bill that would legalize competing currencies, legalize the Constitution, legalize gold and silver to circulate next to our paper currency and not be punished for it. Today, you're punished if you use it. You're committing a crime. You get taxed for gold and silver exchanges. So this way, it could be a gradual transition. You don't have to close the Fed down in one day. But if people get nervous, say, hey, maybe I ought to put my money in a bank that says they'll back it up by gold. So this would be an alternative to what we have. Well,
speaking of the Federal Reserve, it looks like Ben Bernanke will be confirmed for a second term in office as chief of the Federal Reserve. This is obviously controversial because he was the one in power when the financial bubble burst, when the real estate bubble burst. So many Americans angered by these bank bailouts, by these CEO bonuses. They're asking, where's the oversight? And they're looking to Ben Bernanke. He's probably going to keep his job. What do you make of all of this?
He's going to keep his job, and he's going to probably end up with more power. The very least.
How does that work? I mean, these two things are clashing, right? Americans are angry over what he did when he was in power, and so he's getting rewarded by getting a second term.
They're very powerful, and they have a lot of influence. So the more amazing thing is, how in the world did we ever get the audit bill as far along as we have? but they're going to be still fighting that tooth and nail. And I know the president doesn't want it, so who knows? He might even veto some of these regulations in order to get this thing out. But no, that's generally the way it works. But it's more than just Bernanke. He might have been there when the bubble burst, but he wasn't there when the bubble was building up. That was under Greenspan's, control of the Federal Reserve. He caused the bubble to be, blown up so big. So it's a system that is bad. This idea that a secret central bank can create money and monetize debt, buy all the government debt in order for us to do the things we shouldn't be doing. That is the principle is bad. So as bad as Bernanke may be and as undeserving as he may be, the issue is much bigger than just Bernanke.
So he may be no different than anyone else. So is this an issue where, regardless if it's foreign policy, economic policy, regardless of party, it's pretty much going to be the same thing?
Yeah, if I thought just changing Bernanke, I should spend all my time on blasting Bernanke and arguing the case for somebody new. But they're not going to put anybody in there that doesn't endorse the same ideas.
Great. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.